Hello, everybody. This is me presenting my coursework 3. My topic of discourse of my coursework is influence of cultural taboos on menstrual hygiene management among adolescent students in Iba-Payam. Iba-Payam is an administrative area within Western Equatoria State, South Sudan. In my first slide, I have my background of the study and the problem statement. The background of the study basically gives the historical background. Where does this problem starts from, right from global perspective to the contextual area of my study, that is IBA. Then the theoretical, I looked at one theory basically, that is anthropology, to see how this theory relates to my study problem, which is menstrual hygiene management. And under anthropology, it explains that cultural taboos culture influence our ways of life. Conceptual, this basically defines terms from different scholars. My key terms here is cultural taboos, and then menstrual hygiene management among adolescent students. And then the contextual here clearly explain how menstruation hygiene, what is the status of menstruation hygiene within South Sudan, particularly Ida County. Secondly, my statement problem shows the ideal situation. What is the ideal situation of my problem, which is menstrual hygiene? The ideal situation here is women are supposed to practice good hygiene practices to ensure that they keep themselves away from uh, things that would affect them. For instance, if they practice bad menstrual hygiene, then they're at a risk of containing infections like UTI. Then the real situation here is, how is this happening in other parts of the world and within South Sudan, Iba Payam? So in this case, in most of the rural areas in the world are still leaning on or honor cultural taboos to influence menstruation practices among women and young girls across the world. It is common in countries like Nepal, India, Tanzania, South Sudan, actually everywhere. And these cultural taboos differs from society to society. The existing gap here is most of researchers have carried out research, but particularly for IBA, there has been nothing of that kind. In my second slide, it is the purpose of my research. What the purpose of the study and the research objectives. The purpose of this study is to investigate how cultural taboos influence menstrual hygiene practices among adolescent students in Iba-Payam. That is my main aim. Actually, purpose of study is what is my aim. And from this aim, I have broken it down to research objectives, or two specific objectives. The first objective here is to explore cultural taboos associated with menstruation among students in Iba Payam. To explore the cultural taboos, what are the menstrual taboos associated to menstruation? And the other thing, to investigate the level of knowledge and awareness of menstrual hygiene among adolescent students in Iba-Payam. This is to find out, actually to investigate is to find out if the students are aware of menstrual hygiene management or not. And in case they're aware, how do they access this knowledge? Uh, Three, to identify the menstrual hygiene practices adopted by students in Iba Girls. What are the menstrual hygiene practices they always do carry out as they are in their menses? Then to identify challenges faced by adolescent students in managing menstruation in Iba-Payam. What are some of the challenges they face both at home or at school? What are some of these challenges they're facing? So basically, this is my research object. In my slide 3, In my slide 3, it talks about the study scope and the significance. So the study scope basically uh, includes the purpose of the study, which answers the research questions you have set, geographical scope of the study, where is this study going to take place? For my case, the study is going to take place in Iba, in two secondary schools in Iba Payam, South Sudan. These schools name them, that is Downy College and Iba Girls Boarding School. Then the time scope for this study is 10 years, the period of time under investigation. Where do I start my investigation from? So for my case here, I've considered 10 years, that is from 2016 to date. Study significance. How important is this study? Of course, academically, this study will provide insights to future researchers with similar topics or with similar variables, or researchers would want to carry out a similar research within Iba Payam or anywhere within South Sudan. This could provide them an insight. This study will also help policymakers to come up with this, especially school administrators, to come up with the school policies that supports good practices of menstrual hygiene in schools. For instance, building of wash facilities that would allow girls to freely change their sanitary pads privately. So I'm going to my third slide, that is the literature review. In this study, many authors were used, especially those who had similar study variables to my study. Basically, the 5 researchers that I commonly referred to their literature. One is Atari D.O. from South Sudan. His focus was knowledge and perception of menstrual hygiene management among school-going adolescents to girls in South Sudan. So though there is some similarity, especially we share a dependent variable, which is menstrual hygiene management, and we seem also to share a similar population of school-going adolescents girls. But for my case here, is not South Sudan, it is Iba Payam. In his findings, he stated that girls kept their menstruation status a secret from others. They kept it secret with the fear of embarrassment, and also it's a taboo to always expose your menstrual status, especially to male. This kind of taboo hinders girls from accessing affordable sanitary pads because they cannot buy them in some shops. It is very common in South Sudan here. Shops are mostly owned by men, and they are the ones selling. Some girls were restricted from going to school and kept indoors. Girls are being isolated indoors when they are menstruating by their mothers. Girls face the challenges of accessing safe sanitary pads because of the economic constraint. Most of the girls cannot buy these safe sanitary pads. This leave them to use other materials like cotton wool, all the clothes that are really not safe. The next author is Batia Y of Tanzania. In his study of social, cultural, and religious factors influencing menstrual hygiene management among schoolgirls in Tanzania, discovered that culturally, menstruation meant readiness for sexuality. In most of the communities in Tanzania, menstruation is considered to be unclean among some communities also. So in some of the communities in Tanzania, when a girl started menstruating, this meant readiness for sexuality, eventually marriage. So such kind of cultural setups hinders girls from accessing their education because this puts them at a verge of early pregnancy. In my next slide, still under the same thing, the third author, that is Mohammed Alt, 2026, who carried this study in Saudi Arabia. In his study of determinants, he studied determinants of menstrual hygiene practices among adolescent schoolgirls in Saudi Arabia. We also have the same variable here, especially the menstrual hygiene, though his practices, it is almost similar to my case. So, and also the schoolgirls. So in this case, he carried this study in Saudi Arabia and found out that most of the girls in the urban centers of Saudi Arabia had knowledge about menstrual hygiene management, but those in rural areas showed little knowledge about menstrual hygiene. What does this mean? It means that in the rural areas, there are still cultural restrictions hindering girls from accessing menstrual hygiene knowledge, and this hinders their good practices. The fourth author that is Olusegun Grace of Nigeria, 2024, in her study of menstrual hygiene management, in her study, she urged that women's menstrual health and well-being requires a deeper understanding of the social cultural norms, beliefs, and practices around menses and menstruation. So in her conclusion, she realized that the cultural norms and beliefs greatly influence menstrual hygiene management, hindering women from acquiring proper menstrual materials, accessing wash facilities in public centers. So the cultural norms are hindering women from practicing good menstrual hygiene. Soma, in her study on how menstruation affects girls' education, she highlighted that menstruation is surrounded by secrecy and stigma in many cultures. So all these are aspects of cultural taboos. Some communities expect women to keep their menstruation a secret from other people. In my next slide, fifth slide, I'm talking about now in chapter 3, that is research design and the study of the population. So research design, basically, of course, this study of mine is qualitative, and in nature, I will only adopt qualitative methodologies to collect data that will help in drawing conclusion. So in the research design, you find out whether your research is qualitative or quantitative or a mixed research which requires mixed methods. So for my case here, it is basically qualitative. And this also shows how this will also show relationship between your independent variable and dependent variable. For my case, my independent variable is cultural taboos, and the independent variable is menstrual hygiene management. The study population, the participants of the study will be selected randomly from the 2 secondary schools where the study is going to take place. Participation is voluntarily. Participants will not be forced to participate, and they will only focus. The study will only focus on the target group. So in case a participant is not really comfortable with to continue with the participation, she be granted that right. So under data collection methods, the study being basically qualitative, basing on the study objectives, will call for methods like questionnaire survey, interviews, and group discussions. Questionnaire survey questionnaire basically involves a systematic collection of data through which structured questions are typically administered to the sample population. And here we use instruments like papers and pens. Then interview involves researcher asking verbal questions to the participants with immediate response from the respondent, but with the researcher has to keep in line that the questions are in line with the research topics. Instruments used here could be voice recorders, pens, and papers. Group discussion in research is qualitative method that facilitates exploration of collection phenomena, and group discussion instrument use involve flip charts and voice recorders and marker pens. Data analysis techniques and collection procedures. After collecting your data, how do you analyze the data that you have collected? So here we employed, of course, techniques to assess the relationship between our study variables. Do we have relationship from the data we have collected? This involves organizing, of course, the work, summarizing, and interpreting, because at times some of the data might be written in a local language that might not be understood by everybody. So interpreting the data collected in the field to guide the researcher in making a conclusion on this relationship between the study variables. Collection procedures, this refers to the steps a researcher follows in data collection. These are basically stages which include preparational stage. How does the researcher prepare to collect data? Here, the researcher develops research tools, seeks approval from relevant authorities. In my case, I'll have to seek relevant authorities, those are school administrators, to ensure that they support my research or data collection. Ethical consideration is the last slide here. The study target population, of course, adolescents, girls, most the study target being adolescents girls, many of whom are minors. This implies that ethical standards will be adopted and observed to protect the rights and well-being and dignity of the participants. The participation will voluntary the participants will voluntarily participate and have right to withdraw in case they don't feel comfortable to continue with the research. All participants above 18 will sign a consent paper, and those below 18, their parents will sign a consent paper on their behalf. Words that provoke the emotions of the researcher of the researchers or the participant will not be used while carrying out data. Participants will be protected in any way or the other. Thank you very much. This is my brief presentation on my above topic.